This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello, Cardinal fans. Welcome to the first episode of the St. Louis Cardinals Unrestricted podcast. I am your host, Christian May Suzuki, and we will be talking about all the little things with the St. Louis Cardinals. For this first episode, I'd like to start with talking about some of the lineup decisions that have been made, as well as a reaction to the first series of the year. So, to begin, we can start with Justin Williams, who is probably the least well-known name on the starting lineup this year. He was a second-round pick by Arizona in 2013 that we acquired from the Rays in the Tommy Pham trade, and slashed 271, 333, 423 in 151 AAA games over 2 years, and 277, 331, 455 in 152 AA games over 3 seasons. He's the 19th prospect in the team, according to MLB.com, as a 40 overall, which isn't too bad, but with 50 power, 50 arm, and 50 fielding, and a 45 grade in hitting and running. It's not particularly impressive upon first glance, but John Mozeliak is very, very high on him. He honestly even attributing a future offensive emergence this season to a guy like Justin Williams. And I think that's pretty high praise to laud onto somebody who didn't particularly stun people in the minors. He's 25, turning 26 in August, so he's still pretty young. But in order to really impress me and to really show that you're ready for the major leagues, it seems like you need a little bit more than just 277, 333, 423. Granted, those numbers aren't terrible, but you really need to impress more so than just pass in the minors for you to really show that you're ready for the major leagues. For example, a guy like John Nogowski, the Nogfather, he's a little older and not as touted, but a line of 295, 413, 476 in 117 games with Memphis last year, that is something that definitely raises eyebrows and makes you think that he can be a very, very serviceable contributor. He is a very interesting case in that he also walks more than he strikes out. And Mo pointed this out on an appearance on 101 ESPN. It's an interesting thing because while Mo said that it was something that he was building up while coming up in the minors, he also had it in college in his senior year with 43 walks and 27 Ks. In 2017, it wasn't as impressive in the minors with 27 walks to 25 Ks, but it really picked up in 18 and 19 with 44 to 25 in 18 and then 69 to 54 in 2019. Another interesting thing that attributes to is he was third in the minors in K percentage over walk percentage in 2019 and only trailed two incredibly highly talented prospects, Nick Madrigal, who is one of the best hitting prospects out there, and the number one prospect, Wander Franco. There are some issues, obviously. A guy doesn't just float under the radar with those types of numbers and hitting presence and not have some issues. And it's not so much issues as it is just positional fits. As a first baseman and an outfielder, the power is low. The speed isn't quite there. All the little things that you need to fill these positions in a traditional sense just aren't there for Nogowski. Now, he's playing outfield, which is fine. I think a guy like Harrison Bader, a guy like Tyler O'Neill will certainly cover for any defensive deficiencies or range deficiencies that he may show. But the fact remains that he is a bit of a tweener, not quite fitting in the outfield or first base profile, but not being able to play any of the other positions. So down the line, if a DH shows up, that would be something that would definitely benefit him quite a bit. I think he would definitely, a guy who isn't quite fitting in the field obviously fits as a DH. So, it's a natural fit. Some people would say that Nogowski made the team over a guy like Lane Thomas, who's currently in the minors. He had a pretty rough showing last season, so I'm not particularly surprised that he's in the minors. Obviously he had a really good start to his career, but he's shown that he's a little bit streaky in his limited time. And it's obviously hard to tell with such a low sample size, but that's just the impression that you get from him. It's not the best thing in the world to have a inconsistent player. That's just the nature of baseball. Another guy that's interesting in terms of where he fits is Harrison Bader. I don't think I have to harp on the offensive issues that Bader has. I'm sure that Cardinal fans are plenty familiar with the fact that he can't hit a slider to save his life. That's just, if you've watched him more than 3 at-bats, you'd probably see that. The one thing that sort of concerns me, or not concern per se, but intrigues me, is the difference that Harrison Bader and Kevin Kiermaier, the reception that they receive from their individual teams and their individual fan bases. Kiermaier is a very similar player. He hits in the 220s, not a particularly huge amount of power, not a great walker. I mean, he draws walks at a decent rate, but it's nothing to cry home about. And he can't hit a changeup to save his life in the same way that Bader can't hit a changeup or a slider to save his life. So there's that huge hole there in his game and in his offensive game that would make you think that he would be maligned or hated or receive some of the same flack that a guy like Harrison Bader currently receives from Cardinal fans. But you don't hear that because those guys, they understand the importance that the defensive value has. They understand that it's okay to have a guy who may not be a plus hitter, but makes up for that in his defense, in the range. And another similarity is that they're both center fielders. So that range is more important, arguably, than in any other position because of the domain that it covers and of the centrality. Obviously based on name, the centrality of center field and how it's in the middle and covers the greatest amount of area and the most central amount of area. So it's an interesting situation. It would be nice, obviously, to see Harrison Bader develop an ability to see a slider where you can't just throw him 3 sliders and call it a day, consider it done. But honestly, to bench him for, if a guy like Dylan Carlson shows up, then sure, it's fine. But just to bench him because he's struggling to bench him when he brings all of this defensive value and defensive potential, it's just, it's just reactionary more than anything. Speaking of reactionary, let's talk about Nick Castellanos and that whole spiel. I didn't see the play. I'm going to be real. I wasn't there, so obviously I don't know what was said either. But what I will say is that I am very much on the side of get over it. At the end of the day, it's baseball. It's a competition. And sure, there's a respect element to be had. But when you hit a batter, and then that batter does stuff to the team, he has a right to celebrate. He has a right to do things in a certain way. He wasn't particularly disrespectful. He just did a normal competitive taunt. And whether or not you like that, that's up to you. But at the end of the day, it reminds me a lot of touchdown dances. If you don't like it, don't put them in that position. Don't let them do that. Don't hit the batter. Don't let him get hits. Don't let them make these catches. Don't let them have those opportunities. If you're going to cry about it, focus instead on not letting them get the opportunity to do that, because at the end of the day, that's all that's going to matter. We're going to go into a next game, and what happened the previous game isn't going to matter. The taunting isn't going to matter. And it's going to be forgotten in a few days. So it really doesn't matter at the grand scheme of things. If we're really going on this whole crusade to hate Nick Castellanos after this, it just seems irrational. It just seems ridiculous, because I feel like if we're on the other side of this, there would be no sort of, oh, I get what you're saying about how it was taunting and how, oh, it's unsportsmanlike. No, we would be supporting our player all the way, just as Cincinnati and their fans have supported their player all the way. And we shouldn't call them out on it. We should be better. We should not let that happen again. Simple as that. Because that's baseball. That's sports. That's competition. And that's all that matters. So going into a more of, I guess, a preseason topic that's turning into a mid-season topic or a early season topic is the lineup and the position of players in the lineup, and this idea of putting your players in the best positions to succeed on offense. Now, I don't have a huge problem with the way that the lineup has been set. It's more personal preferences, more personal philosophies and ideas that I think I would apply in a different way. I think one of the things that bugs me a little bit is this idea of putting players in a certain position because they get more at-bats than the next position. So what I'm saying is, putting a guy at this emphasis of putting the guy at 2 over 3 or 3 over 4 because, oh, he gets so many more at-bats than the next guy. If you really look deep down and you go through the last couple of full seasons and you take a look at the guys who have hit at those positions and you compare how many at-bats they get, the difference is really basically negligible. There is a difference, but it's not something that you should be predicating your entire philosophy around. Players that bat first from 2017 to 2019 that had a minimum of 81 games, so about half the season, averaged about 46 at-bats per 10 games, or 46 plate appearances per 10 games, 45.93 to be particular, per 10 games. If you go down one spot in the list to second, that average goes down to 44.79 per 10. So that's about 1.15 per 10 games, which means about 11 per 100 games. Are we really going to predicate our entire lineup around 20, maybe 20 at-bats? Not even? A little bit more? Not particularly anything special. So this idea that we need to put our best hitter second or our best hitter third because they get more at-bats, it's so negligible that it just shouldn't be the philosophy that drives your lineup creation. The philosophy that should drive your lineup creation is the philosophy that should drive any coach or any manager to do whatever they do, and that is putting your players in the best positions to succeed. That is what coaching, managing, doing things for your players is all about. What are your best players? Who are your best tools? It's pretty obvious. It's Nolan Arenado and it's Paul Goldschmidt. So what do? You surround those guys with the proper talent and you put those guys in the best positions to succeed. It's not just about putting Nolan Arenado at 2, putting Paul Goldschmidt at 2, getting these guys in these certain positions so they can get more at-bats. It's about protection. It's about order. It's about putting guys in a position where they can succeed, in a position where they can thrive, where they can use their skills to the best of their abilities, or where other teammates can take advantage of their skills to the best of their abilities. So when you're looking at a lineup that has a mediocre hitter in Paul DeJong protecting one of the best hitters in the lineup, you have an issue there. When you have a guy like Dylan Carlson, who admittedly is unproven, but is a very, very, very solid player and one of, the number one prospect in your entire system, there has to be some give there, because you can only favor these players for so long in terms of your lineup order. I say that the guy like Bader, you can cut him some slack on offense and give him some time, but Harrison Bader is hitting 8th. He's hitting 9th. He's not hitting 4th. He's not our cleanup. He's not protecting the best hitter in the lineup. He's not playing arguably the best or most important role outside of the two main guys. So it's just ludicrous to me that we're so caught up in 2 and 3 in putting things lined up based on at-bats, when we should really be focusing on putting guys who are in a position to succeed and contribute to the team to do so, and players who may not be as much so in a position where they're not going to harm the team as much. And putting Paul DeJong in the 4th spot is probably the most harmful thing to this team right now, because he's not a cleanup hitter. He's not the 4 hitter that we need as a team right now. It's just, he just doesn't have it. And, you might want to argue with me, and, you might bring up numbers and whatnot. He decent slugging and etc. And that's fine. But I see what I see. And I don't see a cleanup hitter in Paul DeJong. That's all it is. Do I see a potential cleanup hitter in Dylan Carlson? Absolutely. You can tell the way that a guy looks at the ball, the way that a guy flows when he swings the bat. I mean, we saw that first bomb. The way that the swing just smoothly flew through. You can just tell that there's a guy who's ready to contribute, who has that sort of ability to swing the bat in a particular way where you just know that he's comfortable, and you know that he's seeing things, and you know that he is ready to go. And Dylan Carlson has that. And Paul DeJong maybe doesn't have that. The inconsistency has just been too much. And I would not hold DeJong at the 4 spot for any longer than I feel comfortable, or at least that Schilt feels comfortable, or Schilt feels that another player is not comfortable enough to take that spot. A player like a Dylan Carlson, a player like a Tyler O'Neill. It just needs to be a little different, because if we are taking that first series, it's just not quite gonna work. So, I guess with all that hoopla, the question is, what would my lineup be, right? Well, I think you would go like this. You would go Edman at 1, as it is. You would go Dylan Carlson at 2 for the moment. You would go Nolan Arenado at 3, contrary to Schilt. And Paul Goldschmidt at 4, again, contrary to Schilt. You would probably go DeJong, or no, you would go Tyler O'Neill at 5. You would probably go DeJong at 6. And then Yachty at 7. Obviously, the DeJong at 6 and the Yachty at 7 are somewhat interchangeable based on how Yachty plays. But, you do want to have a little bit of juice, as little as DeJong may have. It's a little bit in comparison to Yachty, who obviously is also older, and you don't want to put that type of pressure on to really drive in the runs. And then, of course, eighth, you have your Baders, your Williams, your etc., etc. So now that we're done talking about the lineup, we can start talking about some pitchers. The two pitchers in particular that I think deserve to be discussed are Jack Flaherty and Carlos Martinez. And I guess we could throw Adam Wainwright in there for a little bonus. For Flaherty, I have one thing to say. Not a word, but just a thing. Calm down. It's time to relax. It's time to watch. And it's time to wait. Because if you watch Jack Flaherty in his first good season, that really, really great year that he had, you could see that he had the composure, that he had the stuff. He had an elite plus pitch, and he made those pitches when he really needed to in those big situations. That's what Jack Flaherty was before COVID, before all of this weird circumstantial stuff happened. Pitching is all about rhythm. It's all about routine and staying in a particular groove, in a particular zone. You have your routines every single week. You're waiting, especially for starting pitchers. You start every 5 to 6 days, and you have a particular schedule and a routine that you go through on each of the off days. That's the reason why all this idea of a 1 less rest day, 2 less rest days, it's such a big deal because it throws off the rhythm. It throws off their rotation. Suddenly, they're doing other things in other days, or they're not doing particular things that they would do to warm up for an appearance. It's just, it's different. So when you take this really awkward season that we had last year and then compound it with the fact that this first game, it was really cold. I don't remember the exact number, but it was quite cold. It was cold enough where both starters, Luis Castillo and Flaherty, had some of the largest velocity average drops from last season's average in the entire major leagues. I believe Flaherty was about 1 or 1.5, and Castillo was about 2.5. Look, Jack Flaherty is a winner. He's won in high school, and he's shown that he has that ace potential and that ace stuff, that ace grit in that big year that he had. So it's just a matter of waiting for him to get back in the groove, waiting for him to get back in the rhythm of a normal season and just regular life and the real world. And, everyone has been thrown off by this whole situation. And for a guy like a young pitcher who was finally getting in his groove and finally getting comfortable with his stuff, to suddenly be thrown in a unprecedented shortened season, it's hard to really judge until we get another 10, 15 appearances where he's just not it. Then you can be concerned. But the first appearance of the year in cold weather, it's something that it's just not that big of a deal. Now, going into the next pitcher, if it were a guy like Carlos Martinez, which he once again did not have the greatest start, then you have some concerns. And why is that? Because as talented as Carlos Martinez has been, he has proven time and time again that it's not just a mental issue or control issue. It's a maturity issue, and it's a composure issue. It's a leadership issue. Carlos Martinez has not proven that he can lead a Boy Scout troop, much less a staff of pitchers at this point. He's had plenty of inconsistency. He has games where he complains about calls or misses calls, and then it clearly affects the way he pitches. And you can't have a guy as your go-to guy if there's a potential that he's going to walk 6 guys in 2 innings. And every year we wait and we wait for it to blossom, and we wait for it to develop, and we wait for him to really grow up and be that guy that that we need him to be. And every time there's something else that happens, whether it's mistreating the way that you handle an injury, whether it's, doing outside things that distract from what you're trying to accomplish here. These are all things that it's just, when you have question marks around you already and you know that you have issues, it's just not good to see. And having every start be a coin flip is just, it's getting old. It's getting old. And I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone else it's getting old. It's getting tiresome, and they have to figure out what to do soon, obviously, because they held on to Jose Martinez for too long, and now they've held on to Carlos Martinez for too long. And at some point, you got to pull triggers, and you got to figure things out, and you got to make the trades for guys that do need to move their way out, not guys like Randy Arozarena, who hasn't had a chance, Luke Voigt, who hasn't had a chance. These are guys that you should give chances and keep. Carlos Martinez, he's been given a chance, and that chance has been thrown into dust because seems like nothing has changed. It really doesn't seem like anything has changed with him. And look, Carlos, if you listen to this, I know you're probably not. It's nothing personal, man. I really, really hope you prove me wrong, because you have some great stuff, and I will be the first to admit that. But I just can't. Past performance is a good indicator of future results. It's a saying that my dad always instilled in me when I was a kid. If we've had 4 or 5 years of past performance, it just hasn't worked out. And a segment of a year, a smidgen, or even you could argue a full year where he was truly elite and his numbers matched that potential that we think that he could have. What side do you think I'm going to think is going to come out? Obviously, the one that isn't quite there, the one that isn't quite as good, the one that hasn't put it together because he's just not mentally able to compete at the major league level. Like, it's not an easy thing to do. Being a major league pitcher is the loneliest place on planet Earth. It's not fun. But at the end of the day, this is a business and this is a job. And you can say that I don't know how to pitch, and I don't, and I can't criticize because I'm not there. Well, I'm not being paid millions of dollars and dedicating my livelihood to this and putting the hopes of staff workers, of the general manager, of John Mozeliak, of fans who invest their money into this team. You owe them, you not owe them, but you have a certain responsibility to them that is laid out in your contract. And at some point, you have to perform or you just have to leave. And it just seems like Carlos Martinez is on his way out. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of the St. Louis Cardinals Unrestricted podcast. Currently, the plan is to go bi-weekly and come on every Sunday and Thursday, but obviously with how things are moving forward and the fact that this is sort of sprouting, that schedule is subject to change. But keep track of us on our social media pages, on Instagram at St. Louis Cards Unrestricted, Twitter at STL Unrestricted, and on Facebook on STL Cards Unrestricted. And you can keep track of what's going on with us and how we're going to move forward with this podcast. But anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate your listening, and good night. Go Cardinals.